Hi everyone, Phil Travis here, and today's lesson is on non-consequentialist ethical theory. So non-consequentialist. Remember last week we had the presentation on consequentialist ethical theory. Consequentialist ethical theorists believe that what makes an action right or wrong is the consequences of the action. So for an ethical egoist, it was if the action was maximizing the consequence, was maximizing an individual self-interest. A utilitarian, if the action is maximizing the greatest good. Well, many ethical theorists say, well, what makes an action right or wrong is not the consequences, but actually that you adhere to some form of universal ethical code. So, for a non-consequentialist theorist, right or wrong, whether something is moral or immoral or even amoral, amoral is a term that refers to an action that carries with it no moral weight. Right or wrong for a non-consequentialist believes that you know that this is based on duty to do what is right, not on what the consequences are. So some varieties of non-consequentialist theories. The one you're probably most familiar with is divine command theory, in which an individual believes that ethics are commandments from God. And in the image here, of course, is a artistic depiction of Moses receiving the Ten Commandments from God. The Ten Commandments are an example of a divine command um, ethical um, theory. The idea that, or ethical code, I should say, the idea that what is right and wrong is dictated by what God has commanded, rather than what people have created as the understanding of justice and rightness, but instead it's actually a command from God. There are also act non-consequentialists who basically um, are are intuitive. Intuitive means that when you say you intuit something, intuit is basically your first thought. When you have intuition, your intuition is your immediate thought before you've taken a step back to break it down and think about the pluses and minuses of everything. Intuition is your natural kind of spur of the moment gut feeling thought. Well, some act non-consequentialist theorists believe that you can know the right or wrongness of a situation by simply going with your gut and what feels right, using intuition on the basis of whatever particular situation it is. And then there are, of course, rule non-consequentialist theorists, and these are the ones we're going to talk about. A rule non-consequentialist theorist believes that there are universal rules, that is a universal code of duty that all people know how to follow and know exists. And we have a duty to follow these rules. And so, what is right or wrong for a rule non-consequentialist is that we follow the rule, regardless of the consequences of the action. The most well known and famous of the rule non-consequentialist theorists is Immanuel Kant. Immanuel Kant lived in the 18th century. He was a German at the time in the region of what we call Prussia, but today it's part of Germany. Immanuel Kant created an ethical theory in which he believed that there were universal moral rules that were the product of human reason, that they were universal moral rules that people had created as a result of logic and reasoning. It's based on some primary principles. The primary rule for Kant is what's called the categorical imperative. And basically, what the categorical imperative means is you take any particular action and you put to it what's called the reversibility test. You universalize the action, you reverse it, and you then ask yourself, would it be okay for everybody to do this action? And if it can't be carried out by all people at all times, then um, then it is an immoral action. You should not be doing it. Um, Immanuel Kant also believed no one should ever be treated as a means. This was his practical imperative. That humans, if you treated a human as a means rather than an end in themselves, that too was an immoral behavior, a violation of fundamental ethical rules. Kant believes that people are only moral if they are struggling to adhere to duty. And so what makes an action moral for Kant is that you're doing it because of duty. If you're not doing the action because of duty, it's an amoral action at best. So he believes you have to follow your duty over what you're inclined to believe is right or wrong. So it's a fundamental adherence to ethical duty, and it's centered around what he sees as universal moral rules that have been brought about through the development of human logic and reasoning. Another of our rule non-consequentialists that you read about in our book is Sir William Ross, or sometimes referred to as Sir W.D. Ross. William David Ross, pictured here. Ross believed there were moral truths as well, just like Kant. But one of the big issues is, okay, Kant and Ross, they say, well, there's these moral truths. Big issue is, well, how do you know what the moral truths are? If there are these moral truths, how do we get them? How do we get at them? How do we know what they are? How can we be certain that we're correct about what these moral truths are? And Ross provided a method in which a person would kind of have an intuitive way of understanding basic duty and basic moral ethical codes. He called these prima facie duties, or at first glance is what it means. William Ross believed that every single person, like Kant very much believes this too, that all people have sort of ingrained in them an understanding of duty, of universal moral codes, of universal ethical and moral codes. And Ross said that if you allow your intuition to dictate your feeling on an issue, that at first glance there will be certain prima facie duties that will become known to you. These are important duties like fidelity, justice, gratitude, non-malfeasance. These types of things, he said, everybody has ingrained in them. And if we allow our intuition to act, then at first glance we'll immediately know some of the most basic of these universal moral truths. So just to reiterate again, our rule non-consequentialist theorists are theorists who believe that there's universal ethical rules that exist within all of us. They may be the product of human reason over time. They may be somehow ingrained in all of us. It's never really clear exactly how they are ingrained in all people, but a rule non-consequentialist absolutely believes that within all people there is ingrained an understanding of duty and universal moral truth, and that we have to act on these. For Kant, it was, taking the action and universalizing it to all people, or taking the action and determining whether or not you're using a person as an end or a means. It meant acting on the basis of duty over inclination. Ross, it was about understanding certain prima facie duties that could be revealed to you at first glance. So anyway, guys, I hope this is helpful, and let me know if you have any questions.